Hello my bookie friends, it's me, Kit, and this is my world. I mean, if you're new around here, I'm Kit, and this is my world. I'll try and do it properly. You must forgive me, I was recently attacked by a werewolf, and I'm missing several legs and various other appendages, so I'm hopped up on adrenaline and nothing else, I promise, nothing else. But before I embarrass myself any further, let's do a tag, because that's what we do on this channel. So, moving swiftly along, this is the Hindsight Is 2020 reader tag, and it's originally by Erin at Erin Go Read. I'll leave a link in the description below. And this one was stolen from various booktubers, so I can't name everyone that I saw do this tag. I saw about 5 or 6 people, and I've stolen it off all of them equally. I'm an equal opportunities bandit. Anyway, let's get cracking. Question number 1. What were you like as an early and learning reader? Well, this is an interesting one for me, because I don't recall ever learning how to read. I must have, at some point, been a learning reader, but I feel that I leapt from my mother's womb already knowing how to read, and probably already ranting endlessly about Catherine Kerr and Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wirtz. I was always reading. There is evidence here. This is me as clearly an intellectual toddler, reading with my mum and dad, and I came from a very educated, very literate family. My grandma was an author, my parents were both actors. I was surrounded by art and culture and literacy and literature, so books were always a fundamental part of my very, very young life, and I just sort of grew up with them and felt that I always knew how to read. Question number 2. What book or book series really got you excited about reading as a kid? Well, again, my answer might not be standard. I could reel off the Narnia Chronicles again, and I've mentioned in several videos that the Narnia Chronicles were my early books that I read, and really got me addicted, well, certainly got me addicted to fantasy, but also got me addicted to the notion of reading series of books. But obviously I was reading books prior to Narnia, and one of the earliest ones that I remember, and that had a very special place in my heart and was genuinely magical for me, was Folk Tales by my grandma, Lyla Berg. I think there's a longer title to it, but I just think of it as Folk Tales. My early memories of Folk Tales involve me climbing out of bed first thing in the morning and climbing straight into bed with my grandma, where she would be typically sipping chamomile tea and eating porridge, and I would eat some porridge as well, and she would make up stories about the trolls that lived at the bottom of her garden. She would just extemporise on the spot. And these trolls, by the way, were the kind of trolls that I will show you in some illustrations in some graphical sort of thing. They weren't like Tolkien trolls. They weren't big, giant, lumbering monsters like in Tolkien. They were little and mischievous. But she would make up stories about the trolls that lived at the bottom of her garden, and I would be captivated. And mixed in with the memories of her telling me those stories are 1 or 2 stories from the book Folk Tales, and I'm not sure now whether she was testing the stories out on me before writing them, or whether she'd written them decades in the past and she was just recycling her previous material. But either way, I associate the book Folk Tales with my grandma telling me stories in bed while sipping chamomile tea and eating porridge. Question number 3. Has there been a person in your life, real or fictional, who inspired you to be a reader? Yes, and it's kind of answered already, really. I mean, my whole family inspired me to be a reader, but in particular, Lyla Berg, my grandma, the author, who used to read me stories all the time and also make up stories all the time, which thrilled me and really enlivened my young imagination. And then later, in childhood, when I was 10 or 11 years old. It was that special teacher. Everyone has one special teacher, the one teacher that wasn't a complete dick. This teacher was called Colin Carey. He liked us to call him Uncle Colin, and in those days that didn't seem creepy. And there was nothing creepy about him at all. He and remains one of my favourite human beings I've ever encountered on this planet. A marvellous man. But in those days, we're talking, this is the early 1980s, and primary school in those days, all the teachers were female. It was just very rare to find a male teacher in a primary school in England. So Colin Carey was the only male person who worked in the whole building. And so he was a novelty, but he fostered a particular kind of fear, and he nurtured this. He liked all the children to be terrified of him before they entered his class, and it would be a case of, we would have a teacher for 1 year and then move up a year, and it would be a different teacher, and then move up a year and another teacher, and so on. So as we got closer and closer to being in Colin Carey's class, we were more and more trepidatious, because he loved to be scary. He played on the whole being the only man in the building thing. He was growly, he seemed menacing and mean, and it was all pretend, and it was a big secret, because once the children would rise up to the level of being in Colin Carey's class, they would discover that he was the most delightful human being. He was funny, he was warm, he was kind, he was so knowledgeable and so clever, and just incredibly enthusiastic. And we very quickly discovered that all we had to do, if we didn't want to do any work at all during the day, was ask one interesting question first thing in the morning, and the answer would last the rest of the day. He would just talk and talk and talk, and he would draw illustrations on the chalkboard, and he would make models to demonstrate things. He was so passionate about, well, in particular, history. History was the topic that he was most passionate about, but he was passionate about everything, and he just loved spilling out all this knowledge into our young minds, and we lapped it up, and we just wanted more and more and more. We were the most enthusiastic students in the entire universe during that one special year that we were in Colin Carey's class, and he had a marvellous sense of humour. He would absolutely mock us mercilessly, but we loved it. We wanted more and more. And at the end of the year, when we were going to move up a class and the next kids were going to move into his class, he made us all promise not to let them know that he was nice, because he wanted them all to be terrified and then have the delightful surprise of finding out that actually Colin Carey was a superhero. I've never known another teacher like that. And one of the special things that Colin did was he introduced us to Roald Dahl, and he would read the entire books to us over the course of a day or 2 days. He would read an entire Roald Dahl book, and he would do all the character voices, and he would perform it, and he'd be leaping around doing crazy stuff. He performed to us, but he gave such life to the characters, and he thrilled us. And as a result of this, it made us want to read. It made us want to read all these books that he'd been reading to us. And so rather than forcing reading material down our necks or down our eyeballs, how do you force reading material down? Rather than forcing reading material into our brains, he would just do his thing, and we would want more and more, and it worked really well. It's best teaching methods ever. Of course, he was hugely unpopular with all the rest of the teachers. The other teachers hated him because he was so much better than them, and he showed them up. Once we'd been in Colin's class, we knew what a good teacher looked like. So Colin Carey was a marvellous human being and an extraordinary educator, and he definitely fits the bill for someone that got me excited about reading. Question number 4. At what point did you begin to identify as a reader? I'm sure I've already covered that one. I was always a reader, but certainly from, let's just say, 3 years old, I was very confidently reading. But before that, I was reading as a toddler. Question number 5. How has being a reader shaped your life and your world view? Well, being a reader introduced me to the man I love and hope to spend the rest of my life with. So it's been huge. Reading brought me to that place, and we're both bookie people, and hopefully we will continue to read together for the rest of our lives. Question number 6. Tag someone whose reading history you want to learn more about. Well, I don't do the tagging thing, and I need to explain this now because I caused a bit of a misunderstanding with someone on Instagram the other day. So I just want to clear this up. I love being tagged, even though I said in a video, maybe my previous video, shortly before being eaten by a werewolf, I said something along the lines of, I think tagging is rude, and someone got concerned because they had tagged me in something. No. I love being tagged. I often don't know that I've been tagged. You need to tell me that you've tagged me because I don't get notifications and I don't always get to see the videos in time. So tell me if you tagged me and then I'll be delighted to do it. I'm tag man. But what I find rude is tagging other people because unless I tag every single person I know, I feel like I'm missing people out and it makes me very uncomfortable. I feel that I'm going to be hurting someone's feelings if I don't mention them. And I know it's just a silly... Other people don't have this problem. It's the way my brain is wired. I feel guilty. I feel uncomfortable and awkward. And I feel that I'm being rude. So that's what I meant by that comment. So I'm not going to tag anyone specifically, but I'm going to obviously say, as I always do, you're welcome to do this tag if you want to. However, I am going to do a shout out, and I also don't do shout outs very often. I started off in the early days, I did 1 or 2 shout outs, and then I started to feel uncomfortable for precisely the same reasons, because I was missing people out. But this is a very special shout out, so I want you all to come closer, Clarice, and pay attention. Okay, brain doing things. This is a shout out to someone who I shouted out in my previous video, and I felt that I didn't do a good enough job, so I want to do it properly. This is the way it goes with me. Okay, so this is my lovely friend Nichi from DarkBetweenPages. Now, she is such a lovely, sweet, kind, good-natured, generous soul that I really wanted to give her a shout out in my scary video that I did last, but and in fact I did. I mean, in the video I did talk at length about both her and my other lovely friends Josh from Working Man Reads. I gave them both a shout out, but in the edit I realised that it was running a little bit long, but more importantly, I was trying to maintain a certain amount of suspense in the atmosphere. I wanted it to stay spooky, and me gushing with love about these people that I've made friends with on BookTube kind of spoiled the atmosphere a little bit, so I cut it short. And then I felt really bad about it, but I felt extra bad because Nichi then thanked me for the shout out. And nothing makes me feel more guilty than a really lovely, kind person thanking me for something that I don't think I deserve it for. So I'm hoping that I can make up for that now by saying Nichi is an extraordinary booktuber. Please, if you haven't already, go subscribe to her channel and watch her videos because she's lovely and so generous. And I don't know how she finds time to do BookTube. I can barely find time to do BookTube, and I do nothing else. But she's a working mum. She's squeezed out multiple children. I happen to know that she's extremely incontinent as a result. She's probably wet herself just now listening to me say that. It happens. It's nothing to be embarrassed about, Nichi. Don't worry. There are products that you can use, but oh, she's gonna hate me. She's not really incontinent. Oh, Nichi, I'm really sorry. I got excited and my mouth did what it did and stuff came out, words and things. Anyway, big shout out to Josh at Working Man Reads, who is one of the nicest, kindest, most genuine human beings on the planet, and a big shout out to Nichi at DarkBetweenPages. Both of these people are extraordinary booktubers. I love them to bits, and I felt bad that I cut them short in my previous video. And on that note, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share, and I will see you next time. See you later.